Lindsay, and thank you, Interfaith Scotland. It's always a pleasure because I get invited to so much stuff in London to just be on home turf. And whilst there's a lot going on in the world today, I thought I'd give you a journey into my world and maybe give you a little bit of a break from what's going on outside and really share the journey of someone who's embarked on a different kind of adventure. Being the first woman, and the youngest, and the first Scot, of course, what's it like to be the Secretary General? And the title today is very apt, which is Leadership for Peaceful Coexistence. Because I think the question that I had to pose to myself, taking on the mantle of being elected, was what kind of leader did I want to be? I inherited a 25-year-old institution. I myself am third generation Scottish Pakistani, British Pakistani. And so I knew that I would be representing a bit of a change in terms of what we're probably used to. So people always ask me two very important questions. The first is, why on earth at the age of 29 would you possibly want to be the Secretary General of the Muslim Council Britain? Muslims tend to have quite an exciting time in the political world, so really, do you want to do that? Yeah. And the second question, more importantly, is how on earth did you get elected? Obviously, I was majority elected by Muslim men, conservative communities, imams and mosques, so it's not quite on a par with what we're used to. And I think as to the first question, well, why? Someone said to me that, isn't it about time? 50% of Muslims in the UK are under the age of 25, and with the recent census, 15. So half of everybody we represent is a young person. Half also happen to be women. And then I think also our communities are becoming so much more diverse. We don't just have one kind of identity, it's so much more complex. So really the organisation was really in need of a change, and all of you here represent faith institutions. So you know how difficult it can be to engage young people in future generations. Personally, I just thought, well, if God opens a door to good, maybe you should take it, and maybe I should just give it a try anyway and see what happens. I didn't honestly believe they were going to elect me, Maureen. I just kind of thought maybe it'd be really nice to try. And then the second point, which is, well, how on earth did I get elected? I think my election, which made history, is really a mark and a testament to the communities I represent who were also ready for a change and who felt like the important question we have to ask ourselves is, what are we looking ahead to? So what does this diverse and vibrant Britain look like? How are we part of the new story of Muslims in Britain? But also, we don't really need to kind of keep telling ourselves we're Scottish enough or British enough. It's bypass that. It's more like, what kind of society do we want to see? And what are we bringing to the table to make that a better place for everyone? So our strat plan is always about working for the common good. So anyway, within 1 hour of being elected, I suddenly became a public figure. My Twitter following went up quite exponentially. The Telegraph, Times, Guardian, everyone's on the phone, and within a couple of hours I'm live on BBC doing my first interview. So obviously this was lockdown, by the way, so I'm a lockdown president. So I literally created a studio in my living room with my bird floral wallpaper behind me and some lighting with a lamp. So it was very kind of makeshift Zoom. And people don't know this, you can't actually see the interviewer. You're talking to a blank screen, right? So I'm having this really high profile interview. I've just been elected to this thing. I didn't actually think it was a big deal, if I'm honest. I obviously realised that it was a really big deal. So I've been elected and I'm staring at the screen. I could just hear this lady from the BBC saying, she's just firing questions at me, and I'm just thinking, oh my God. So I just answer. And then one of the very nice uncles messages me saying, yeah, this is why we elected you. I was like, okay, passed the first test. Yeah, I know. Gosh, thanks very much for the validation. Unfortunately, it was a stormy week. Not everybody was prepared for the news. Because generally speaking, there's a lot of tropes around Muslim women in particular. Unlike Lindsay, we're all hidden, never that colourful and never that loud. But it was definitely something really different for the mainstream media to cope with. Generally speaking, people were very, very positive, very optimistic. And so I had a very famous interview on Women's Hour, which most people will remember, I know. And I was sitting there, it was day 4. I thought, okay, and I was doing about 8-9 interviews a day, local, national, regional, global. It was really big. Everybody just wanted to understand who was this young Glaswegian that they've elected with this Scottish accent to be one of the most senior faith representatives in the country. I mean, it wasn't dawning on me like how big this was. So I was going in between interviews, and the women's hour was, it was very hostile. Very soon, the tide changed. And I remember thinking to myself, when an interview's not going the way it needs to go, you always say to yourself, I've got 2 choices here. I can argue and be aggressive and defensive, or I can kind of choose, I don't know, higher moral ground, or I can choose a different way. And I thought, the communities that have elected me, it's only been day 4, they're counting on me to represent them well. And the communities that don't know me are forming their first impression of this leader, right? And at that time, some of the kind of far-right commentators called me a token, a puppet. She's a nice, pleasant smile away from a cross-eyed, bearded man, and I quote, so some really not very, very pleasant stuff. So I thought to myself, I'm not gonna take the bait. And I was very calm, and I did my best, and my face ended up in the front of the Guardian front page, print edition, because it was an open letter. But it taught me a really important lesson that whilst we had changed as communities and we'd moved on, the world around us hadn't necessarily, and that I had a lot more work to do in terms of that peaceful coexistence and maybe reframing who are we today and what are we about. And so as the week went on, I kind of decided maybe I should stop with the media. It's a lot, everybody wanted a piece. And so parking that side of the story, so my first lesson was around, that framing of who I could be based on what other people felt, as opposed to me dictating the narrative. So I put it close. The second battle I had, maybe even the tougher one, was inside. Now, when you're the youngest person in the organization and you're also the boss, doesn't always go down very well.
I don't have that problem.
You've got. So basically, I just didn't have my stripes and spots. Hadn't earned enough Scout badges at this point. I'm literally really new. See, the problem is I didn't really appreciate. Generationally, I'm already very different. So my version of just a really good idea was miles away from what had ever been done before. We've never. And I had a comment once that I've been doing this for 35 years, what do you know? And I said, well, I'm kind of the boss, so I'm just going to do it my way. So, you gotta be a bit sassy. You have to be a bit sassy. So I kind of realized that, because in my head it was well, why not? I had the whole why not, I'm new to it. But I also learned the importance of taking people with you. Too much fighting isn't a good thing, and you do need people to follow to be a good leader. You need some followership. So innovation is great, but meaningful change takes time. Stagger that stuff, but at the same time, don't be afraid to just do it anyway. So there was a couple of moments where we just did it anyway. But what I found was that changing institutions is very challenging. We all create cultures. We're all part of cultures, and in that culture, we're so used to. This is how we've always done it, and we all do it. Change is difficult for all of us. But what I realized is that for me to take the organization where it needed to go, the first thing I had to do was check, who do we really represent, right? So if you're a representative organization, you've got to see, does anybody actually still think that we represent them? And MCB was reaching its 25-year anniversary as well. So anyway, lockdown eased, and off I went on my travels. And I visited over 200 organisations all over the UK, from Swansea and Newport to Aberdeen to Liverpool, Leeds, Blackburn, Leicester, you name it, I've probably been there. And I had all these unusual moments where I'm sitting in the chairman's seat of the mosque thinking, am I allowed to be sitting here? Is this okay? Or sitting in Leicester in the prayer hall at the front, and with everyone sitting on the floor, I'm on the chair, and we're having a 2.5-hour Q&A with some of the most senior figures in the community, and thinking, oh my God. And afterwards, they're like, yeah, you did great. I'm thinking, yeah, you put me through it. But what I found is that, to be a leader that is meaningful and impactful, you have to connect to people. It's all about relationships. All of you being here today, it's long-standing relationships, it's getting to know people. And it wasn't about me saying to communities, this is where you need to be. It's me finding where they were and thinking about how can we move forward together. So I went with some very conservative scholars, for example, and I said, look, I really respect what, the traditions, the communities, but how can we move like one step forward together? Like, where can we go? How can we, I need your help, advise me, show me, right? And so I thought what's really important is that on this journey of community transformation, because ultimately I'm working to serve those young people that are coming, right? So our institutions, even our faith and communities, have to adapt to those young people who don't see being part of an institution really what they want to do. They can have 1 million followers, more than, the rabbi, the priest, or the imam. So why do I need to follow you for? Why should I? Why do I? So a lot of young people say, well, what's in it for me? Why do I need to go? Other than Friday prayers, for example. But, and in the age of social media, where there's so many kind of online scholars and online influencers, that whole tradition is really lost, and people are just taking influence from everyone. So anyway, through all those travels, I confirmed that they were still with us, which is good. They still wanted to follow. And I think for many of them, there was a curiosity to understand me, because they just were like, oh, what is she about? Like, what is this? What's going on here? So I think meeting the community was important to reaffirm that my leadership wasn't about an imposition, but an invitation. And to really say, though, isn't it time for us to offer a confident, bright, and optimistic future for our communities? Shouldn't we include women, disabled communities, different minorities, the marginalized, the refugees communities that are coming from all over the world? Like, we instituted just this year Eid with refugees, because I said, what are we doing? How are we doing our bit to bring communities in? And so it was a really important exercise in understanding what does that landscape look like, and I can say it's a good landscape. There's a lot of amazing work. I went to Batley and Dewsbury, and there was an imam and priest kind of interfaith food bank, but also a football team. So every year, I don't know if anybody's any good, sorry guys, I don't know, but they play each other. The priests and the imams have a kind of kick-off, and it's all for good, all in good fun. I don't know, but they take it very seriously, and that was brilliant. I just thought, you know what? And they said, look, anytime, because Batley and Dewsbury is a swing seat, so what they say is the politicians come, they want to tear us apart, and we say, look, get lost. We're not interested. The strength of our community is not about what suits you guys politically. So that was really inspiring too, and I think what we realised is, okay, now is the time for community transformation. So by getting a lay of the land, I understood, lots of stuff going on for youth, mental health, the environment, bringing communities together, food. I think there wasn't a mosque that I didn't go to that didn't have a food bank, which is both positive but not great, is it? The fact that our country is just full of lots of food banks. So I'm going to stop the story there, and I'm going to take you somewhere fun, and then we'll come back to the serious stuff. So let's talk about Vogue. So the reason that I wanted to pause there is, that's a reflection on how to transform and change communities, and I'll come back to it. But I want to share the Vogue story with you, because I want to share the importance of social and cultural capital and how we transform attitudes and minds. So after my kind of celebdom, Vogue reached out and said, look, we'd like to feature you in our piece that we're doing. And I was like, what do you mean? I'm not a beauty blogger, I'm not a fashionista. What is the Secretary General doing in that? So anyway, my mum's like, of course. So off you go. So I go off to this photo shoot, sitting there very awkward and major imposter syndrome at this point, thinking, what on earth am I doing here? Is this even okay? And then along pops Vivienne Westwood.
Wow.
I know, that's why I had to share it with you guys. I was like, this is a really good story just to share. It's got nothing to do with peaceful coexistence. So anyway, she'd done her makeup and her outfit, and she'd done the photo shoot. Then she wanted to get her nails done after the photo shoot. So she comes into the back room, and as you can imagine, she's kind of royalty in her own right. So we all just everyone's a little bit nervous. So we all just pretend that we're totally calm and cool. Just like Vivienne Westwood's coming in, I was like, oh, okay, right. And then she's complaining about the environment, America, and this needs to change, and we need to take action, and this and that. And everyone's just like, whatever you say, Vivienne. Just whatever. And we were all just super starstruck. And I thought, OMG, am I actually in a room with Vivienne Westwood at Vogue? So anyway, we did the photo shoot, but in the end, for me, I finished it, and then I went off to another event, and we were at the launch party. the whole thing was very surreal and uncomfortable and confusing. From a faith point of view, we're not really in that space. And I remember afterwards why it was so powerful and why I've shared it with you today is because so many mothers, young girls, and families got in touch with me to say, you don't know what this means for our young girls. You don't know what this means that you, with your headscarf on, representing the faith, not any kind of trend, is featured in the global fashion magazine in the world for a cause. And one of the girls said, I really struggle with my headscarf. And so it just gave me this confident boost. And it's this point about normalization, isn't it? So to be featured not in a negative story, not in a hot, most of the time I'm always called for negative stories. But it was so positive, and it really meant a lot to the community. And for me, I just kind of thought, wow, I never really considered that in the work of what we do in faith and stuff, that actually being visible in a positive way, in a mainstream way, and a lot of my engagement actually in the past 2 and a bit years has been to go in places that we haven't been before, to form relationships, whether it's the big corporates or, Butcher's Hall, for example, 100 years in City of London, Lord Mayor banquets. And, I found myself in Calderdale and the Interfaith gathering that they have, which is really lovely, all over in lots of different pockets and places, lots of schools, because I realised that we've also got an important message to share, and it has to be positive. That actually, it's not just about our contribution. Sometimes that if we contribute, then we're good. But it's actually about showing our positivity in who we are as good people and sharing that. And, I speak to loads of audience. I went to a school in Newport, and there was a very young, little young boy, and he said to me, "So you proud of yourself?" I was like, oh my God. What a cutting question. What a deep philosophical question. This little 8-year-old's asked me. And I'm thinking, I just paused and I looked at my colleague thinking, what do I say? I don't know what. And he really made me reflect on this notion of leadership. That can we say that we're proud of ourselves, And the fact that this young person has asked me that is really quite... Sometimes they say that young people ask you things that you never expect. And I remember 4 months into my term, my mum turned to me and she said, "So what have you actually done? What have you changed?" I said, "Mum, it's only been 4 months. Give me a break, And so all these different moments, they kind of, in the first 2 years, it was managing lots that was happening in the world. There was terror attacks, there was more international crisis, there was stuff inside about how do we change and transform our institution. There was this idea that the clock was ticking because elected post. But there was also that idea of, could I be proud of myself? And so I put my name in the hat again and was re-elected in February. They couldn't get rid of me. So I came in for a second term. It's been 9 months. And I think I had such a steep learning curve in those first 2 years that I recognized some really important things. One is that we don't change anything ourselves. Great friendships, communities, and relationships make change. I attended a dinner, and this was when Partygate and all those other scandals were happening. And one of the guys at the dinner, he said, politics isn't going to change things. It's civil society. It's people like you and me that are going to change things. And I said, yeah, I think you might be right. And what I realized is that, my leadership wasn't just about representing the communities I represent, but it was actually about representing young people, saying, well, why can't you? Why can't you be a leader of this massive organization? It was about women in leadership, and showing that we come in all sizes, shapes, different forms, and all the rest of it, but that, yeah, we can lead, and we don't need to be typecasted and, too bossy or too weak or too soft. But also it was about being a really confident faith leader, and I say faith plural, because what's really interesting in this country is faith communities are often trivialized, a little bit kooky, a little bit crazy, whatever it is. We're kind of pigeonholed as not as intelligent or whatever it is, yeah? But we are so politicized, There's a story, they want to know what we think. And it dawned on me that this always constant balancing exercise. So I wanted to be a good leader for faith communities. And to say that actually, as a young person, I'm the head of a faith community, and very confidently so, and I can articulate, and I'm educated, and guess what? Spirituality is really important. And if it wasn't for all of you, a lot of people would have gone without in COVID. If it wasn't for all of you here, the fabric of that compassion and care and asking your neighbor, are you okay, just wouldn't have been there. And so there's a role that faith communities play that cannot be replaced by anybody because of the social fabric of society. We're continuing to bring light, and that's a wonderful thing to be part of. And the final lesson that I guess I'll share with you on this adventure, what are we looking forward to? What are we looking ahead to? And so, I'm halfway through my second term, clock is ticking, and there's been this big overarching question of like, well, what will I leave behind? What is the legacy that I'm going to pass on? Because we get an opportunity, there's a door, and then the window's going to be over, and then you've got to go on to the next thing. And for me, it's all about that future. It's about developing a culture in the organization that inculcates good people to continue good work. It's about fostering really strong relationships, a network of them that continue to do good work together, whatever happens in the world. It's about saying young people, that value proposition we offer them is that they're confident for the opportunities that they can attain. And it should be, why can't I? Absolutely you can. And I think it's making sure that whatever happens or doesn't happen, that I can answer that question, are you proud of yourself? That I was in that moment proud of all of us, because we did our best, and to pass it on in a better way. So I want to thank you, Interfaith Scotland, for this fantastic opportunity. I hope the Vivienne Westwood story was fun. But it's been quite the adventure. You can follow me on social media and see all that I get up to. But for me, being born and raised in Glasgow and being part of this family is really, really special. And it was really such a highlight for me to be able to do this today, and really fitting and apt, because I felt that no matter what, we have to maintain that unity and to continue to show the world that actually faith in leadership is a wonderful thing. Thank you so much.